We're on live here with ESPN 106.3, the final countdown upward of Super Bowl Sunday coming up this Sunday. It's Colin Russo, Christian Cat, now joined by a Super Bowl champion himself. You could hear him on ESPN, on the TV airwaves, amongst Get Up and First Take and all those crews. And you could also hear him on Unsportsmanlike 6 to 10 daily on ESPN Radio. It's none other than Chris Canty. Chris Canty, welcome to the program. How are we doing?
I'm doing great, Colin. I'm down here in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. Two great teams. The vibes are immaculate. Very few places do big events like New Orleans, especially big sporting events. So I'm just happy to be a part of it all.
Being outside of the game now as a media personality, do you like going to the game? Do you like the Super Bowl week? Is it a little too much? But what's the perspective on the other side?
No, I love it, man. Being down here and having an opportunity to connect with so many people that I've known throughout my football career, former teammates and coaches, but then also people that I've met throughout my media career. It's like a big reunion, and to have an opportunity to be a part of that from both the player perspective and the media perspective is pretty special. So it's been great. A lot of accidental good times that have been had in a couple of days that I've already been down here, and looking forward to some more over the weekend.
Chris Canty with us, of course, played with the Giants on that second Super Bowl winning team, drafted to Dallas, had an 11-year NFL career over Baltimore, Dallas, amongst other teams. CC, I want to start with the beginning of your career. You played, of course, in the ACC. Really quickly before we get into your NFL career, because I'm curious about it, because I don't know how the ACC people really feel about it. Do you have a sense of defense towards the ACC with how everybody's kind of treating them in this new college football playoff era?
Well, here's the thing. I will say it's a different level when you consider the Big Ten and the SEC and what they've been able to do with conference expansion. Listen, the ACC has tried to keep pace with that, with the addition of several schools, most notably SMU, and they found themselves in the conference championship game this past year. But I don't think you have to defend the ACC. The record speaks for itself. We're a conference that's always going to churn out premier talent, and it's always going to be a high quality of sports. So I don't feel like you need to defend the ACC, but we can also acknowledge that there are levels to this thing, and the SEC and the Big Ten are in a different stratosphere.
Drafted to Dallas out of the University of Virginia back in the early 2000s. You played under Bill Parcells your first couple of years there in the NFL. A Super Bowl winning head coach with the Giants, somebody who's pretty storied in that Giants franchise before you even got there, but was with Dallas towards the end of his career. Give us a sense of your relationship with Parcells, how that developed towards the beginning of your NFL career.
Well, I'm a Bill Parcells guy even before I was drafted to the Dallas Cowboys, because I played for Al Groh, one of his lieutenants at the University of Virginia. And I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from the Bronx, Co-op City. And so I saw all of those Giants teams in the 80s and in the early 90s. And seeing Lawrence Taylor and Parcells on the sideline, it always felt like it was something special to be a part of anytime that was your head coach. And so to have an opportunity to learn the game and to see it through his eyes is no doubt a big reason why I was able to play over a decade in the National Football League and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. So very grateful to have an opportunity to be a part of the Dallas Cowboys and to be drafted by Bill Parcells.
Was there a sense of pressure that goes into that when you go into a Super Bowl winning head coach who has had success with the team you kind of grew up watching? Was there pressure going into that?
Well, pressure is a privilege, and I don't think there was an inordinate amount of pressure. Obviously, as a young guy, a rookie, going to a team, you want to be able to make a name for yourself with that organization in this league. But I was prepared for it. I knew exactly what to expect when I went to Dallas, not just from an X's and O's standpoint, but also from what was going to be asked of me from a professionalism standpoint. Al Groh did a great job of being able to make sure that he, helped me out when it comes to the learning curve of knowing what it takes to be a successful NFL player. And so to have an opportunity to get pro coaching in college really prepared me for that moment and prepared me to be a part of Bill Parcells' program in Dallas.
You played under a lot of coaches who had future head coaching careers when you were with Dallas, even the Giants, sometimes with the Ravens as well. Guys like Wade Phillips, of course, you played underneath. You played underneath Mike Zimmer. Todd Bowles was on that staff as well. As a player, can you tell when a player or a coach on the staff, I should say, has head coaching in his future? You could tell that they're sometimes wired differently?
Well, here's what I will say. When you have a coach that can talk the game with other players on the team that are not in his position group or on his side of the ball, I think that lends itself to being a really good head coach. one of the things that we get caught up in is the specialization in sports, not just with athletes, but with coaches as well. And we focus so much on how well they can connect with the players that are in their position room or the players on their side of the ball. But having a coach that can talk to all the players on the team and really go into the nuances of their responsibilities and how it all works together, I think that lends itself to having a really good head coach in the making. And that's one of the things that Bill Parcells required of his lieutenants. You look at Sean Payton with the Dallas Cowboys, Mike Zimmer once upon a time. You had Todd Haley on that staff. You had Tony Sperano on that staff. You had Todd Bowles on that staff. So there were so many coaches that Anthony Lynn was a part of that staff as the running backs coach. There were so many coaches under Bill Parcells in Dallas that had opportunities to connect with all of the players on the team, not just the players on their side of the ball. And I think that groomed those guys to be able to have success when they were the ones as the head coaches at different places in the National Football League.
Is that the biggest testament to a coach's greatness when there's a tree that follows him? Because there's certain coaches, Mike Tomlin comes to mind, where there's not a lot of guys that follow in the footsteps of becoming head coaches past that. Is there a certain skill that comes with developing coaches, future head coaches in your, I guess, coaching tree?
Yeah, I do think there is a skill to it, but I don't necessarily know that that's the end-all, be-all in terms of that head coach being able to have success. I mean, nobody from the Bill Belichick tree has been able to have success apart from Belichick, right? You see what happened with Josh McDaniels. You've seen what happened with Romeo Crennel. You've seen what happened with Charlie Weiss. Those guys haven't been very successful apart from Bill Belichick. And so I don't necessarily know that that's requisite in terms of being able to judge a coach, but I do think it does speak to, a coach's ability to be able to empower his people while they're there, to have them understand what it takes to be able to manage the entire operation. There is a skill when it comes to being able to develop your people. And I think that when you see a tree like Bill Parcells and how many of his disciples have had success around the NFL, that's just another feather in the cap in terms of his overall greatness.
Chris Canty of Unsportsmanlike, former defensive lineman for the Giants, the Cowboys, the Ravens, a great NFL player, now host of Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio, joining the Final Countdown now on ESPN 106.3. Chris, you went to the Giants, and you signed that great contract. You won a Super Bowl with the Giants. Had a lot of success there. Was that always in the plans for you to at some point return to New York and play at the biggest stage where you were from, or did this kind of spur about later in the Dallas tenure?
Well, for me, it was all about trying to compete and win a championship. A high tide raises all boats. And if you're on a championship winning team, it's going to do a lot for your individual career. And so to have a chance to reach the pinnacle of our sport in that regard, to play on the biggest stage that the NFL has to offer and come out on the successful end, was a motivating factor behind my decision to join the Giants. Now, it just so happened that it was in a division that I was familiar with, and it was in my hometown, but that wasn't necessarily the plan. The plan was to get with a team that had a quarterback where there was proof of concept that they could win at the highest level. The guy could get it done, they could win a big one. And seeing what the Giants did in 2007, being a part of that Cowboys team that the Giants came to Texas Stadium and beat in the divisional round, that gave me an up-close and personal view of how special that team is and how special Eli Manning was, and also how special Tom Coughlin was as a head coach. So when I had an opportunity to join them in free agency, get the bag in my hometown, it just happened to be the perfect confluence of events. I hit the trifecta with that one. It absolutely worked out perfectly.
And the timing was interesting because we were talking about earlier this week in the spirit of Super Bowl Sunday coming up, some of the more important wins this century, important, monumental type of Super Bowl wins. That 2007 Giants team comes up. Well, the 2011 Giant team, there was a lot of expectation going into that game because the Giants didn't really do a whole lot of much in between those two games versus the Patriots. Going into it, you weren't a part of the first one, but you were in the locker room, in the building for the second one. What was the feel amongst the guys once you figured out, all right, we're going against the Patriots again. You're not going to be 12-point underdogs. The Patriots are still a better record on paper, but this is a different type of underdog feel. Was there a confidence in the team there? Was it a let's get them back again, we got their number, or was there more pressure that time around?
It was supreme confidence. We knew we were going to win the game. The fun part is just figuring out how it was all going to unfold. And I don't think anybody expected Manning to Manningham on that final drive. that led to the go-ahead points, the game-winning points. But it was just a fun ride. And even going beyond that game and thinking about the playoff run that we had, it started in this penultimate game in the regular season, beating the New York Jets at home on Christmas Eve when we were actually the visiting team, beating the Dallas Cowboys in the regular season finale to win the division, rolling the Atlanta Falcons at home in the wild card round, going on the road and beating the 15-1 Green Bay Packers team led by
It's one
Aaron
of the better
Rodgers.
wins.
And then having that culminate with the overtime win against the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, it was just a really, really special run to get us to that point. And we all believed in each other. There was a core of players that had been there and done that. So we knew when we got an opportunity to play against Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, there wasn't that air of invincibility around them because a lot of the guys in that locker room had already beaten them. And they had the experience of how to be able to handle the 2 weeks between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. So if anything, I was prepared. Walking out to the coin toss with Eli Manning and Zach Diossi and Chris D and Justin Tuck, I just knew that we were going to win that football game. I knew it. And you could see that there was a little bit of angst, a little bit of concern in the eyes of those Patriots players because this was the team that once upon a time slayed the dragon 4 years prior. So, yeah, there was no fear factor for us going into Super Bowl 46, even though we had a negative point differential, even though we didn't win double-digit games that season. None of that stuff mattered because all of those guys in that locker room had the belief that we were going to go out there and win that football game.
Is there a nothing to lose factor of that? You guys, of course, played in the wild card round. You took down the 15-1 Packers. Was there a nothing to lose element of that team?
Well, you can't say it's nothing to lose. It's a Super Bowl. You got an opportunity to win a championship. So there's absolutely something to lose. The opportunity to etch yourself in NFL history to get your name put on that Lombardi trophy that goes in the team's trophy case. So there's absolutely something to lose. The stakes are huge. It's the Super Bowl. You live your entire life to play in those games. But I think there was that confidence that we had as a team that we were willing to do whatever it took in order to win that football game. And that comes from the demonstrated performance that we had in the 5 games prior to that and just seeing the sacrifices that everyone to a man made in that locker room, the sacrifices that all of our families made as we committed more time to being able to be at our best when our best was required. So when we got to Indianapolis, there was no doubt that we were going to leave on that plane the Monday morning after the Super Bowl with the Lombardi trophy.
There's not a lot of guys in your position as a player who have played for 3 different NFL Super Bowl winning head coaches. You played for Coughlin, you played for Harbaugh, you played for Parcells. From your perspective, compare and contrast how they sort of operated, and more importantly, what made them the same, but also what made them different.
Well, I think what makes them the same in the way of being able to be successful is that they're all authentically themselves. They are who they are. And when you spend that amount of time around any group of people, they know whether you're being genuine or whether or not you're being a fraud. For Bill Parcells, he's always going to have those quips, those quick comebacks. He's going to have a sharp tongue and be able to motivate you, whether it's speaking directly to you or talking about you in the media. One way or another, he's going to find a way to push the buttons to get the best out of you. Tom Coughlin is the type of head coach that's going to wrap his arms around you and love on you to the point where you're afraid to disappoint him. So he didn't do it by fear of firing guys. He did it by fear of disappointing him because he cared so much about you, not just the player, but the individual man. He's one of the only coaches in the NFL that I've ever seen that did more and cared more about the development of the person than the development of the player. And then you have John Harbaugh, who is, son of a coach, and in all of his ways comes off in that way. Somebody that is attention to detail in every single facet of his football team and wants to be hands-on with every single phase. So they all have their different ways of being able to go about it. But I would say the one through line is that they're all authentically themselves. And that's why their players always have that trust and belief that they're going to be successful if they listen to them. That consistency in who they are is what makes it easy for players to believe in what they think the important things are with their individual programs.
Yeah, it's how you get players to kind of buy in and sell to it because almost you believe in what they believe because that's who they are. Chris Canty joining us from Sportsmanlike, former NFL but defensive lineman, joining the program now in the Final Countdown on ESPN 106.3. Chris, last thing before we get into the game on Sunday, Jerry Jones, John Mara, Steve Biscotti, a lot of different types of owners. I'm curious from a player's perspective because I don't really know. Jerry Jones is the highlight of a lot of Cowboys things. Did you have a perspective about how owners own the team when you were in the locker room as a player? Is this sort of a blinders on situation? How did you react to how different owners are involved there? Jerry Jones, very hands-on. John Mara, another guy who's had success but hasn't had the most success in the last 10 years. And then Biscotti, who has been a part of the Ravens for a very long time and is mostly hit on the bullseye in most of his moves. How have the owners owned? Did you make a note of this when you were a player?
Well, yeah, you want to play for owners that are committed to doing whatever it takes to win. And so with Jerry Jones, there's no question about that. When I was in Dallas, he was committed to taking big swings and taking risks on guys and bringing them in. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I mean, look at our wide receiver room. We had Terrell Owens, who was a hit when he was there in Dallas. Then we also had the big trade for Roy Williams. That didn't necessarily work out for the team and all parties involved, but it showed that the owner was committed to putting good players on the team in effort to try to have success at the highest level. Seeing that in New York and the commitment that the Mara and the Tisch family made in terms of what they were willing to pay players and how they were committed to making sure they had a firm culture and empowering the head coach in Tom Coughlin in order to do that. And then with the Baltimore Ravens, Steve Biscotti, he might be one of the most humble team owners in all of sports in terms of being able to relate to his players, asking guys what he can do for them in order to have success. Is there anything else that he's missing that we need to consider? I remember when I was in Baltimore, the ownership and the coaching staff came to the leadership council, which I was a part of, and they asked us, did we want to go back from an artificial turf field to a grass field? And the leadership council voted for a grass field, and a year later, they're putting grass in M&T Bank Stadium. So that just shows you the mindset of Steve Biscotti. There are a lot of different ways to do it in terms of being a successful owner. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of organizations that had great ownership. But I would just say from the player perspective, you want an unwavering commitment to excellence from your ownership. And if you have that, you're in a good spot.
Really quickly, I don't want to put you in a spot here. Is John Mara maybe giving too much empowerment to the coach and what they have in the brass right now for the Giants?
Well, John Mara has put the brass of the New York Giants on notice. Anytime you have to release a letter stating that the head coach and the general manager are going to be back the next season, that lets those two individuals know that they're going into the next season on the hot seat. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a big offseason for the Giants, a big offseason for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, because last offseason was not a good look. Hard Knocks was a disaster. Saquon Barkley and what he's done in Philly looks like a disaster. And then, of course, letting Xavier McKinney walk out of the building in free agency turned out to be a disaster because he was great for the Green Bay Packers. So there are a lot of black marks on the ledger of Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. They've got to have an offseason to fix that. And we'll have to wait and see what happens and what they do. But they've got a steep uphill climb.
Chris, we got the game this Sunday. Are you more on the side of the story surrounding the three-peat? Is this can the Eagles spoil the party for you? I know you have the Giants ties and everything, and you played for Dallas. You don't really, I'm not sure how much you love the Eagles, but where does Chris Canty stand in the game on Sunday?
Well, listen, I love the Eagles because I love the players, right? They have a really good roster, the best roster in the NFL. One of my favorite players in the NFL, Jalen Carter, defensive tackle. I love that guy since he was the man off the bench behind Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis in Georgia. But he's a really, really special player. So to have the opportunity to watch them is going to be fun. But this is a can't-lose type of matchup. On one side, we got Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the three-peat and the GOAT conversations with that. On the other side, we have the Saquon Barkley redemption story. We have Jalen Hurts in the conversation about him being amongst the best quarterbacks in the NFL, taking his rightful place. And, of course, the redemption story for Nick Sirianni. So I think there are storylines all over the place no matter who wins the game. I'm just rooting for a really good game. And knowing these two teams, that's exactly what we're going to get on Sunday.
Not sure if you're holding back your Super Bowl pick till later in the week. If so, that's fine. But what is your gut telling you right now?
Well, I think it's going to be a close to contested game. I don't see 70-plus points being scored like we saw in Super Bowl 57 between these teams. It will be a fourth-quarter game, and in a fourth-quarter game, it's hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, so I'll leave it at that.
I would tend to agree. CC, we appreciate you giving us the time here. We know you probably got a busy day of media. We know how hectic it can get out there in New Orleans for Radio Row and Media Week, but we appreciate the time. Appreciate you breaking down your career a little bit for us. Looking forward to speaking again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Colin. Enjoy the game.